Day 27, and it's a continued time of reflection, I would say. I'm continuing to think about that process of change and sometimes that tension about what can move us in the direction that we want to go and what acts as resistance in the direction that we maybe don't want to go. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think um, on some level, as much as we may struggle with a career or with a relationship, there are things that we're getting out of it. There is a certain sense of identity that is reinforced for us. There is feedback. There is a sense of belonging. There is that perception of financial stability, of course. And I think those can be things that are quite comfortable for us because I think the alternative is really a place of unknowingness, of letting things be discovered. And I think more than discovering purpose, setting forth as an entrepreneur, that sort of field, I also think there's a certain element of having to face ourselves and having to truly ask, who are we when we strip away some of those roles and titles and functions because we want something different or new? And what are all the illusions that show up in our lives? What is the magical thinking? What is the belief that we'll still be a multimillionaire one day, or that something will still happen, or just simply that we've pegged our worthiness on something that we still think is going to happen, even though it's probably not realistic. And this is where I think some of that pain in midlife comes as well. I think we start to become disillusioned ourselves enough that we stop believing in some of those fantasies and illusions. We realize those may have represented a younger sense of self, perhaps a more idealistic or at times naive sense of self. And as those start to wear away, I think we're looking for what comes next or what replaces them. And I think this is where the challenge happens, because what comes next and what replaces them isn't always revealed instantly, isn't an analytical problem to solve. It is an experience of being with self, making space for self, and ultimately making decisions that align with self. And that is no small feat. And I think I continue to be somewhat amazed that these are not conversations we're having as a society. I think far too often we see the symptoms play out, we see the patterns play out. We are pushing towards something, and then when we don't get it, or when we're forced to confront those illusions, or have to face some of the maybe self-doubt that exists around, if I'm not getting that external validation, if I'm not getting that external reinforcement of who I am and identity and competence in ability, then what replaces it? And if nothing immediately replaces it, and instead we're in a space of navigating and figuring it out and wondering and being patient with it enough to emerge, it can be scary, it can be uncomfortable. Um, it is very much kind of a foggy place at times, I suppose. And I think we also, as humans, always tend to think, if we're kind of not feeling great, if we're not getting those moments of joy often enough, I think we can tend to think that we'll feel that way forever, rather than knowing that this is a transitional phase and trying to find our markers. And I think that can be part of the challenge as well, is if we knew we were progressing, if somebody was telling us you're 60% of the way there, you're completely disoriented, but you're 70% of the way there, I think we'd have more comfort with it. But I think the whole experience is so nebulous and abstract in certain ways, and calls upon perhaps more unconscious parts of ourselves than it does the conscious parts. This is not about grabbing the bull by the horns and taking bold action. This is really sitting with our fear, sitting with our doubts, sitting with our insecurities, sitting with our moments of wondering around our self-worth, and having to maybe dig a little deeper and choose ourselves and assert those things for ourselves and decide that they are true for us, because we believe them inside, regardless of whether we get them externally or not. And is the hard work of midlife, and it happens, I think, in so many different ways and in different shades over and over again, perhaps. Again, as I think about my time here in Paris, I think I can admit that there was some particular cachet I was hoping for to kind of decode Paris, to understand the cool factor and to tap into it and flow with it and maybe leave with it and think, yeah, I know how to be Parisian. I know how to do that cool Parisian life. And I think what I've come to realize is it doesn't line up for me. It's actually not what I want in a sense. I can tell you that I'm not a big shopper. I am not one who loves to go and spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on new clothes. I am not a big fan of crowds, as you can probably see across many of these. And the whole idea of see and be seen and going to different places, really, because they're the in place to go and kind of network or any of those sorts of things. I think that is some of the elements of maybe what I see externally, and I'm starting to understand the mechanics of how it happens internally. You want to come here if you want to have that big social circle of rubbing shoulders with the important people and being at the cool parties and the exclusive clubs and whatever. It does require looking a certain way. It does require investing your time in the right places. It does require investing in certain relationships. And I think probably, and at the risk of being wrong and at the risk of judging others unintentionally in that process, I think it's a bit of a shallow pursuit for me. I don't know that I would particularly enjoy it if I had the opportunity to truly immerse myself in that. And so that did leave me in that place of disillusioned, of wondering what I was searching for and not finding here, and having to come back to myself and ask myself what this experience was about, what I was learning about myself, if I didn't get the cool factor to come and talk about or share or come back and want to have a Parisian apartment, then what did I learn about me, and am I okay with that? And I think it was a slow process of understanding some of those fundamental mismatches. And I would say there's still a part of me that still maybe struggles against that mismatch, that still wants to be a cool Parisian on some level because I like how it looks and how perhaps others might perceive me if I was living that life. And there are undoubtedly layers underneath that of, if others were perceiving me in that, then somehow I'm getting my self-worth of those that are perceiving me in that space. Somebody's jealous of me, then there is self-worth in that because somebody must want elements of the life that I have. And this is how it can show up for us. This is how we can be very reluctant to step outside some of that mainstream, step outside what is comfortable, what is familiar, because I think we're not really used to sitting with ourselves. I think that, of course, we are social creatures. We are inherently interdependent on others. We are a tribal society. So there is definitely some hardwiring there. There are some neurological aspects to it, absolutely. But this is that moment when that sense of self really does start to emerge, and where we feel that tension, and that tension becomes uncomfortable. And I would say unresolved, that tension leads to some of those cliche moments of the midlife crisis. There are those who have affairs to feel alive again. There are those who go and buy the convertible or the motorcycle or go and do the adrenaline driving sports to feel alive again. How many people are in denial about their health around it takes having a heart attack or a real health scare before they're really serious enough to come out of that denial around each of our daily decisions affects our health, affects our bodies. And So do some of those freebies wear off at this age? It is not um, an ability to abuse our bodies anymore because our bodies just feel it a whole lot more. And um, this is some key decision points that will really affect both our longevity and our vitality in terms of the years ahead. And so this is a space where we are called to be more responsible for ourselves in all ways, more responsible for our health, but also more responsible for shaping our lives into a place that better represents them. Because if we're going to get peace of mind, and I think we feel it and we feel that tension of not having that peace of mind, if we're going to find our ways back to that peace of mind, if we're going to sleep soundly again at night and not feel that inner conflict that goes on and on, it happens through choosing ourselves. It happens through truly understanding what aligns for us and truly being willing to make those decisions, even at risk of not getting any external recognition, anything that reinforces our self-worth, anything that soothes our insecurities, anything that helps us get past perhaps the experience of how lonely it can be to choose our own path and to do what is right for us. And this is why I think this phase can be so hard. I think this is why we can struggle so much in this space. It's not an easy space, but it is an important space. I think it becomes a non-optional space. The more we learn about it, the more we sit with it, the more we tune into it and stop distracting and numbing and trying to avoid it. The moment we admit that it is here, it has an effect on us and it demands our attention and our realigning and changing course in life. I think it becomes the new path that we then can rather resist or start finding our way through. And it does ask the question of, where does surrender show up? I think surrender shows up in being willing to let go of some of those illusions, in being willing to be wrong, to be willing to look foolish, to be willing to try something and not be good at it, or try something and completely fail at it. I think we get so accustomed to looking competent, to looking successful, and again, defining ourselves by some of that success, that now when we're having to bet on an unsure thing, it feels incredibly scary because we don't have that same carefree attitude that we might have had as kids, or even as young people. Young entrepreneurs perhaps have a much higher tolerance of failure because it doesn't feel as big. It doesn't feel like there's quite as much invested. It doesn't feel like there's quite as much of our identity that is invested in it. And it takes letting go of those pieces of identity and letting go of whatever pieces are identity or thoughts that we think others may have about our identity, and simply doing what we want to do, choosing our own path, choosing to make really bad art for a little while, choosing to write a novel that goes on and on for hundreds of pages, only to realize maybe we're not so good at writing the great American, Canadian, European novel. But if it's something that brings us joy, if it's something that fills us up, this is again where we go back to, I suppose, process versus outcomes, that engaging in processes that are meaningful to us and letting go of the outcomes is actually the name of the game of this phase. We can't get hooked on those outcomes. The outcome actually becomes a better sense of self rather than the $1 million idea, rather than fundamentally changing an industry, rather than the perfect relationship that you've wanted all your life. These have to become areas of learning, but areas of learning that happen with great satisfaction and with great joy and with great alignment to self. And so I continue to think about those things. I continue to think about what my process here has been, continue to think about how scary those moments feel when we have to let go of the comfortable, when we have to sort of turn on the light and stare at ourselves in the mirror in the cold light of day and really show up with a lot of honesty. And it is the hard thing. It is the work, but I wouldn't be doing the work if I didn't feel like the work paid off. And I continue to believe that it does. I continue to believe that my life is richer, my life is larger, my life is more aligned to who I am, even when experiences are mixed in a foreign country and a foreign city. I would still do it all over again for this experience because I have still enjoyed so much of this experience and take deep satisfaction from it, even if every day hasn't been happy and joyful and full of energy. So I'll maybe leave it there. Lots of thoughts, lots of things to think about, certainly some things you may have some reactions to, certainly some things you maybe didn't want to hear, and yet I think they are really, really important that you do hear them, and letting them sink in, letting them find their place, and letting them know that they will continue your evolution and your journey in just the right way, just the right pace, as and when you're ready. And that voice will continue to guide you. And the worst thing you can do is ignore it or push it away and start to sit with it, start to give it that space, start to learn that it has an important message for you and it is setting you on the path that you need to be on. And it may take some time, but you will get there and it will be worth it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.